What is up, everybody? It's me, Duke Farley, back at it again here on Lost at Sea. And tonight, I am unfortunately joined by, I believe, seventh
I believe
placer.
so.
Made it very deep into the game. Sarah, thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you? What's been going on
I'm
post
good.
game?
Things have been busy. Work's been busy, but it's been great since the game. I've still talked to a lot of the people I played with, and we're having a good time.
That's always fun. Are you enjoying watching these episodes as they air?
I am. I was a little nervous at first because you kind of forget that the cameras are there some of the time when you're doing stuff. So there's a couple moments where I was like, oh, I said that or I did this. But it's really exciting to see what other people's conversations were too. And it also teaches me some of my reads on how people were playing was so wrong. And then I watched the game or watched the episodes, and it's just fun to see what things I was so off about while I was playing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you made it decently far, even though being wrong on a couple things, I guess. But that's a testament to you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, Sarah. I had Madison on after her elimination. How surprised were you to see Madison walking through the door? She said that she was pretty surprised that you were there, but and just talk about the relationship between you guys.
Yeah, so I was very surprised. So Maddie knew that I was going to be there. I did not know that she was going to be there. So I think Maddie talked about it in your exit interview with her about how the weekend before we were in Pennsylvania visiting my cousins, and she came with, and they sold me this big story about how she was just with to keep Jake company for the car ride. And one of my cousins made a comment about, oh, you're playing too, Maddie. And she laughed it off like, no way. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that would be so comical. Maddie would hate to do something like this. So she was probably one of the last people I expected to walk through that door when she did. So yeah, Maddie and I know each other very well. We're very good friends. I was worried that could help me or hurt me. I know she said too that I was apparently going around telling everyone right away that we knew each other, but I was so worried that she would say it or let it slip that I just wanted to be upfront about it right from the get go. So,
Yeah, you kind of answered my follow-up question on that. I
oh,
wanted to
okay.
ask you about your decision. I remember in that first episode you mentioned it on the reward, but probably to other people throughout the season. So you wanted to just get out in front of it and let everybody kind of know.
Yeah, I was trying to like downplay it. I thought I was downplaying a little bit. Like I just said, she's my brother's roommate. Like I didn't think I was letting on how close we were. Maddie obviously thought that I was, but yeah, I was willing to let people know we knew each other. But I was just going to kind of leave it at that. But she was also the reason I know in our intro video we had talked about whether or not I was going to lie about my profession. And then the minute
Yeah.
I saw her, I was like, I'm not going to lie because I know she's going to ask me about work, and there's no way I'm going to be able to keep that under wraps. So.
Yes, I remember distinctly trying to figure out if you were going to lie about that, and then I remember
Yeah,
you revealing
yeah,
that.
she
So,
made that decision for me when she walked through that door. So
um, okay, another question I have for you about your previous connection. Obviously, your brother Jake was hosting some of the competitions this season.
Mhm.
You think that was a competitive advantage for you?
Yes and no. I think the pros are that I have played styles of his games before, so I had some concept of how it worked. But obviously I didn't do very well. Like I went out on a question where the answer was literally in the question. So fun fact about that, apparently when Jake was doing like a presentation on it to the rest of the production, one of the production crew said, "You have to cut that question. It's so easy. Nobody's going to get it wrong." And then when I got it wrong, it was like, "Oh, eat your words," because clearly I could not do it. So I don't really think it gave me much of an advantage. I think I did horrible in his other game too, the bingo scavenger hunt. I also did horribly at. So I would say no, it did not help me.
Yeah. But I do remember us talking about how fun it would be if you were to beat Jake's placement. And let's just say you killed it that this season.
I crushed that goal. So I was so proud that I made it as far as I did. I would have been proud anyways, but the fact that I did so much better than Jake, I was like,
It's gonna be
yeah.
great Thanksgiving banter.
Yes.
Um, Sarah, I was looking back through my kind of chart. I kind of look at, how many times people are vulnerable, and you were pretty vulnerable a majority of the game. Like,
I was.
how taxing is that, not having too many bouts of safety, throughout the game and having to go vote to vote and not being safe?
Honestly, it's exhausting because I have so much like worry and anxiety. You can see it in some of the later episodes when I'm like, I just pray that you guys aren't voting for me and this isn't a blindside. That was me the whole time thinking that, but I knew if I said those things, that's just like your quickest way out the door. So I tried to keep wraps on it and not say how I was feeling as much, but yeah, I was panicked almost every time thinking this could just as easily be me. And my name got brought up a lot too. Once it was out there, you can't shove it back. It just doesn't work like that. So did not enjoy going to all of them. But the pros to it was I did have be able to make a lot of connections with people. Like they start to trust you when you have to go to votes with them and you're not voting them out. So at least I had that benefit from it.
I want to hone in on a round where your name actually gets written down during the votes, specifically round 6, where it's kind of you versus Billy, and it's a split vote. And I want to ask you specifically about a couple of things during the elimination. Obviously, it is a tie vote. Um, and you were pretty disappointed with Marcelo and Ali specifically because you felt
Mm-hmm.
like you had a good connection with them.
Yes.
Um, so I have written down here the people that voted with you being Josh, Kira, Ozzy, and Rocky. Rocky plays a power to come in and vote at that elimination where he wasn't at.
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware that that was going to happen?
I had no idea. So when we were walking into that elimination, I was like, man, this is not looking good for me. I don't know where people are going to vote. The one team kept saying they're not going to they're not going to vote one of their own out, which was why Ali and Marcelo said they wouldn't vote for Billy and would vote for me. But right before we were about to go to the elimination, Josh grabbed me and said, "Don't worry, we have a plan." And he left it at that. And then I was like, I don't know what that means, but hopefully someone's looking out for me. And then Rocky also grabbed me and said, "Don't worry, we've got you." And again, I didn't know what that meant, but I was praying that whatever they were able to pull out was going to work. And then obviously it did. And I reflect on that a lot still because I really, in the moment, I thought Rocky was doing it just to make a big move, to get a threat out. It wasn't about, I didn't feel like it was about saving me. I felt it was about Rocky getting out a bigger threat and making a name for himself. And then I watched later on in some of his other interviews or some of his other conversations with other people. And then I'm like, oh, well, maybe that was a showing of trust with me. I just feel like I had a bad read on Rocky for a lot of it, where I didn't think I was a top priority for him, even after he made that move to help keep me stay. So,
And it's interesting because in this moment, in this specific instance, he's playing this and he's saving you. Whereas in your ultimate elimination, it seems like he's spearheading
right.
your downfall.
Right. Correct.
Just kind of crazy how
Accurate.
the game can change like that.
It changes so fast. Well, that's fine too, because it was after that moment that I felt like I could work with Josh. Like I know he's a pariah to everybody else at this point, but I could work with him. But then he dug himself so far that I was like, I will help you if I can, but I don't know that I could help you. And so you see a lot of conversations with me and Josh about that. I was like, look, if you can get traction somewhere else, I'll join that. But if you can't, then I'm sorry.
Yeah, it seems like post this elimination here, nobody really wanted to listen to Josh much at all.
No, he did the same move too many times, and people kept trusting him. Like, what are you doing? Don't trust him with information. So,
Great. Why were you so mad? Why were you so disappointed? Not mad, but disappointed in this elimination with Ali and Marcelo specifically?
so I thought that I had built really strong connections with the both of them. Like when I formed the priority with Marcelo and CJ the first night, I was not planning on sticking to that. But when someone offers you something, you're not going to tell them no right away. That's just like an immediate target for you. So I was just like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And then Marcelo and I got a lot closer, and I felt like we had a good connection going throughout the game. We weren't really in a lot of eliminations together, but we would touch base and share information. So to find out that he was willing to vote me out over Billy, I was just kind of like, well, what the hell? I thought we were way closer than anything you would have had with Billy. So it's weird to me that you're not willing to stick up for me. And then Ali, I felt like I was guiding him through that game half the time. So to find out that he was like willing to cut me, I was like, you are here because I'm providing you with information and telling you what's going on and helping you through these confusing challenges. Because I was on Ali's team a couple times, and he needed some assistance. So, and I was surprised then that he wasn't willing to stick up for me, um, and vote out Billy. And also, I thought it was so obvious Billy's a bigger threat than me as far as competitions go. Like, he was crushing it. I was doing horribly. So it just didn't make any sense why I was the target at that point when Billy was such an obvious bigger threat than I was. So
So the vote ends up tying, right? And obviously, this is where Josh outs Billy's pendant of power to everybody. At that point, were you like, okay, on this revote, I feel pretty safe because we've just,
hashed all that out. So
yeah,
I did not feel safe, but it was because of a misunderstanding on my part about how the idol could work, or the pendant of power could work. Because I was thinking, I did not realize that if he hadn't played it for the first vote, he didn't get to use it the second time. So I was like, oh, he can still play his pendant of power, but that is not the case. And then, because then it was like, well, he's an absolute idiot for not playing his pendant of power when it was a tie. Why did he not do that? And then I learned after the fact that he could not do that. So in the moment, I was still panicked as all hell. But now when I reflect on it, I was like, oh, okay, I was all right once it tied up. So
yeah. That would have been nice though if he could do that for him.
yeah, well, yeah,
Not
then I
not
would have
you,
sealed
but
my fate so easily. Right.
you mentioned earlier the priority that was, the group that had the wine night reward,
Mm.
Marcelo and CJ. Obviously, that comes into play later in your, you know, the later rounds that you're in. Um, you said that you didn't take that really that seriously once it was formed, but when an alliance is presented, you really can't say no. Towards like the end of the game, there was obviously tension between CJ and yourself and Marcelo. So run me through that relationship and
Yeah.
just the priority.
So it's interesting because I did not realize that I had tension with CJ to that extreme until he outed it in front of everybody. I had a little bit, people were telling me that CJ was telling people stuff about the three of us being in an alliance. But I did not realize how upset he was, that he felt like we were controlling everything and pushing him into votes. I don't know how much of that was him, just trying to save himself in that moment, as opposed to really believing what he was saying. We talked after the game. We're fine now. But CJ would consistently do stuff that Marcelo and I were like, I don't really know if that's what we would do. So we were slowly trying to distance ourselves a little bit while still making him feel comfortable and part of it is how I felt about it. And yeah, I was really upset. So, and you see me pop off on CJ in that episode a little bit because this is the second time in this game that I've been accused of being a bully. And I just really feel like that is a misrepresentation of me. Because CJ was calling me a bully when I've never once told him how to vote. I've only told him who I'm voting for and why I'm targeting that person. I've never said, you're next if you don't vote with me or anything like that. And then Emily also accused me of being a bully in the Emily versus the Coliseum fight, but I never talked anything. I think she described it as us talking shit about her. I was only talking about gameplay and connecting the dots of stuff that we thought was going on. So I just was like a little hurt to be called a bully because I did not realize that I was coming off that way, and I apologize to the people who felt like I was, but I just felt like I was playing the game like everybody else. So
Yeah, and I think you were obviously right, and sometimes the bully word never really love that being thrown around, especially if it's being related to you. So I can totally understand, that reaction.
yeah.
Um, Speaking of the Coliseum, I'm not gonna we're not gonna have to we won't hash into that. But I want to ask you about your relationship with Ozzy. You guys are through, kind of painted as this duo after, Madison leaves, during the touchy subjects, kind of like everybody says you're the secret duo, but secret, what are we talking about? So talk to me about your relationship with Ozzy and, just throughout the game.
Yeah. So the hard part in this game is there's people that you just really connect with, that you get along with, that you want to be around, but it doesn't necessarily mean those are the people that you're working with in the game. So I was working with Ozzy, but we had never made any type of final two deal. I knew when Maddie was still in the picture that I was never going to be a top choice for Ozzy as long as Maddie was around, which is why I was kind of okay that she went when she did. And I did talk with Ozzy about my decisions a lot. And sometimes I chose not to do things I would have otherwise done for fear that it would upset Ozzy or he wouldn't understand why I did it or felt like I had betrayed him. So I was trying to keep him like a close relationship, but I would have been willing to cut Ozzy if that felt like the right move for me. I had no problem doing that. And obviously, that's not the perception that other people had. And it's so wild. What is actually happening in the game sometimes doesn't matter. It's what people perceive is happening. And that was a flaw in my gameplay that I did not realize in the moment, was that Ozzy and I were perceived as this tight duo. We wouldn't take anybody else to the end. But that just wasn't the case for me. I would have cut Ozzy if I felt like it benefited my game. So
If you had felt like if you had had the realization that that's what you guys were being painted as, would you have kind of like would you force yourself to work with Ozzy more closely at that point?
if I knew we were painted that way,
Yeah.
I don't think I would have probably. I honestly, I think I would maybe go the opposite. If I had realized that everybody thought that we were so close and inseparable, I would have maybe considered trying to um, show that that's not the case and potentially vote him out sooner. Because it is dangerous when people think you're a duo. It's especially that at this point in the game when we're at individuals, there's just not a lot of people to pick from. That's a really dangerous thing because it's like a guaranteed person that won't vote for you, or at least that's the perception. So I would be willing to cut him if I felt like that was going to help advance me in the game, regardless of what people were thinking. So,
Right. Sarah, what was in your notebook that was so threatening to all the players?
okay, so here's the deal. I am a type A person. I take notes. It's how I remember things. If I write it down, I'm going to remember it better. I did not realize that my note taking was seen as a threat to these other competitors. And what's wild about it too is we were comparing notes. So I did not realize that every challenge had a title to it and that we might need to know that in the end game until we were like halfway through. So I would be like, oh, Kira, what was the name of the challenge that you and Keaton won? What was that called? And so we were all trading information. So I was really confused to find out that me having the notes that I had was considered threatening when I was gladly sharing anything that was in my notes. And I'll tell you, the reason for the note taking is because some of our confessionals don't happen until later. And so you want to remember, like, this is how I was feeling in the moment. So most of my notes were my emotions of what was happening in the game and not anything strategic. So that's my fault for not realizing, I guess, that people were perceiving that as a danger. Like, I had no idea. Everybody would make comments about the number of pages I had in notes, but everyone was taking information from it. So I thought this was just like me being the team player, like the secretary of the group almost. But apparently that was seen as a threat. That I think it was that coupled with the challenge where I was 1 point away from a perfect score. I think it was those two things together that sealed my fate for me, unfortunately. So
Yeah, it's funny because usually in, school, college, the person that has all the notes are the people that you want to be around, not the people that
correct.
you want to vote out.
Like we want to be in her study group. Yeah,
Which
exactly.
yeah, ends up being partially part of your downfall here.
Yeah,
So,
and this is my warning to all future players: is if you're going to take those notes, don't let people know how many notes you have, because apparently that can hurt
yeah.
you.
Um, I want to get into your ultimate elimination here. 4-3. Obviously, I think we can say that this was a shock, a blindside to you. You were thinking it was going to be Josh. You thought that finally people were going to vote out Josh once he is not safe, doesn't have a pendant, he has the time. How shocked were you that your name started coming up when Papa's reading the votes?
So I would say it was like 2/3 of me was shocked and 1/3 of me wasn't that shocked. And the reason the 1/3 was kind of like, you should have seen this coming. Um, when I was suggesting to people that we maybe need to have a backup name because Josh pulls out pendants, like it's breathing to him. He just does it. They're always there. He's very good at that. So I was like, we should probably have a backup. Otherwise, Josh is going to control who goes, and we don't want to be in that position. But when I would bring that up, no one would be willing to give me a name. And so I was like, well, that's not good. If they're not willing to tell me a second name, that might mean that I'm the second name. But I was just hoping that everything would work out still. At that point, I didn't feel like there was anything more I could do. I just had to trust the people that I had placed my trust in. And then when the first vote was read, I felt okay still, like one vote. When the second vote was read, I don't know if you can see it on in the footage, but Marcelo and I were holding hands, and the minute the second my name comes up the second time, I drop his hand and I look at him and I'm like, is it me? And he's like, I don't know, but he 100% knew it was me. um so that it's right then that I think it really hits me, and that then I knew once the second vote was read of my name, I knew it was me at that point. So that just really sucked. And then I should also say too, that night before, because we went to bed that night and the following morning was the elimination. So I did make it to the final day. But that night, Rocky and Josh went off on the premise that Rocky wanted to try to settle all of their beef once and for all after whatever happened in that past game and then what happened in this game. But I wouldn't be surprised if that turned into making a plan to vote me out, and then that's what came to fruition the next morning, unfortunately. So
Right. I actually had in my notes because during the episode we do see you lean over and ask Marcel something. Obviously, we can't hear exactly what it
yeah,
was. So you're asking him, is it me? And he says, I
yeah.
don't know.
He says, I don't know, which afterwards, obviously, he was well aware. I don't think he voted for me. I think he and Ozzy did not vote for me, but Marcelo 100% knew it was me going. Ozzy did not know it was me going. I think he was as blindsided, if not more blindsided, that it was me. So,
Yes, so they do leave Ozzy out of this vote, and Marcelo
mm-hmm.
was fully aware of it. But I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I wanted to ask you, in the moment when you're getting voted out, it seems like Marcelo has a reaction, is trying to react like he's surprised in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Before more jurors come in and share information with you, in that moment, did you think that he was unaware of what was happening, or did you think
No,
that he
I
was in
felt
on it?
like there was a chance Marcelo knew what was going on. I believe that Ozzy was kept out. That made sense to me because Ozzy was so loyal and so straightforward with everybody about what he was doing that he would have probably told me if he knew it was my name. So I'm not surprised that he was left out. I believe that he was left out, didn't know what was happening. Marcelo, I don't know. In the moment, it just seemed too risky to leave it to that close of a vote if he didn't know for sure what the numbers were, because Marcelo is not someone who was um, falling on the wrong side of votes like ever. Like he was always in the loop. He was always on the right side, unless he intentionally made a choice to not. Like for this, he didn't want to have to cast my name, but he knew I was going, so he felt safe doing that. So I think I knew that Marcelo was probably at least in the loop about what was happening. Um, so yeah, I guess that's where I stand on that.
Yes, and I want to ask you so many other questions, but we have to wait until the season's over to get those
Right.
answers, obviously. So 4-3, yeah, okay, cool. So obviously you are blindsided. You're going two-thirds blindside, we'll say. You're going into the jury. Um, at this point, obviously a lot to take into consideration, but what were you looking for in a winner? Obviously, the season has been a lot of huge swings, a lot of big plays, but what did you specifically want in a winner? What were you looking
Yeah.
for?
Yeah. So I am someone who I don't take things personally. So I wanted someone who was playing big moves, big strategy, great social game. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be front and center. Like in the moment, you don't have to claim that I'm the one who did this. But as long as in the end, if you can explain to me all the moves that you made and how you were integral to those moves, and that's what got you here, and that's what morphed the flow of the game, that's who I'm going to cast my vote for. Because I take that to heart. I want someone to represent our season who played a good game, who played the game of Ascendance, and then just kind of skate by to get there. So that's who you see. I think yeah, that's who you see. That's who I'm gonna go for. So
Yeah. Sarah, is there anything else that we haven't covered up to this point regarding, your journey, your experience in the game, that you wanted to talk about?
I would just like to say that when you had asked me how if I could operate on a certain amount of numbers of sleep, and I think I said 4, I was so wrong about that because this game has you absolutely exhausted. I mean, the game never stops. So even when they're like, "All right, we're done until tomorrow," that doesn't mean shit. People are still strategizing. People are still figuring out what's going on. And just the level of anxiety that I felt during this game. I mean, there were days where it's like, I can't eat, I can't go to the bathroom, I can't, like, everything makes me want to puke because I'm just so nervous. So it was way rougher than I thought as far as like the physical and mental components. It's just nonstop, and it really makes you think for longer games, like Survivor or Big Brother, how long they're in that and having to feel like that all the time. Man, it was rough. It was rough. Yeah, so that would just be my only be mentally prepared if you're going to go into that and play this game because it is so taxing.
Bring a couple energy drinks. Make sure you have your
Yes,
coffee on hand
caffeine is
because
important.
caffeine is important in moderation, of course. But
Yes.
Sarah, what was your favorite part of the entire experience? It does not have to be during the game. It could be during the game. It could be after the game. Anything.
Yeah. Well, I think it was just honestly just hanging out with everybody. Like everyone was so fun to be around, both in the game and outside of the game. Obviously, it was more enjoyable once you're out because the stress of that is over and you don't have to worry about am I making people concerned to bring me to the end because I'm too sociable or whatever. When you're out of the game, you can just chat with whomever. You don't have to worry about any of that. And there's such great people. The last night that we were all there, we went out to a Mexican restaurant and just had an absolute blast, drinking margaritas and eating Mexican food and hanging out. And it was so good to hang out with these people and get to know them outside of the game more too, because they're all really great. So
After the game, you can take all the notes you want, and nobody will vote you out for it.
correct. They're probably coming back and asking me for those notes now. Like, what?
Yes. Well, Sarah, I appreciate you coming on and doing the exit interview. It was a pleasure watching you this season. Congratulations on beating Jake's placement
Thank
by a
you.
lot. I'm sure he'll love to hear about that more. And obviously, you're not done this season. We will see you in the finale during questioning and see who you vote for. So I look forward to that as well.
I'm excited for it too. I'll be curious to hear what everybody's reasons were for who they voted for to win. So I'm looking forward to it.